who went to college to study forestry and later on in life became a composer. Well, today I want to tell you about a Japanese classical composer by the name of Akira Ifukube. Akira was born in 1914 on a northern island of Hokkaido. So he did not grow up in a major cultural center. He grew up surrounded by forest and with these wide northern landscapes, but also with the indigenous Ainu culture, and this had a huge influence on his life. He was really fascinated by the rhythms, by the chants, and by the music of the Ainu indigenous people. Their traditions gave his later work this distinctive, earthy, primal quality. Even decades later, listeners were going to describe his music as sounding ancient, elemental, and almost mystic. Interestingly, he was mostly a self-taught composer because when he went to college, he studied forestry. Before he became super famous as a composer, he just lived a very ordinary life. He lived the 30s and 40s. He lived as a forester, and then later he was designing aircrafts for the Imperial Army of Japan. It wasn't that all of a sudden he understood composing. He just always had this drive and love for music, and he started composing on his own. So while he's doing all this other stuff, he is already composing. It's just a thing, a hobby that he's doing. Now, the turning point happens during the war. He suffered from major radiation exposure. Obviously, his health was affected, but just the experience of war also changed him, and he decided to devote his whole life only to music after that. Now, as I had said, he was already composing right before he decided to dedicate his whole life before that. And in the 1930s, mid-30s, 1935, he already was he was starting to make a name for himself. He wrote this piece of music called the Japanese Rhapsody, and it actually got quite a bit of international audience, and the Boston Pops even performed it. And then a little later, the following year, he was the first one Japanese in Japan to perform French music by Eric Satie. So we can see that he was open to European modernism, but this didn't change, everything about him. He always stayed true to Japanese folk elements and the Ainu rhythmic patterns, bold percussive orchestration, and the things that he was familiar and comfortable with. In 1938, he married Aiko, and they had one daughter by the name of Yuri. His music was very powerful and strong and kind of crazy at times, but his relationship was very stable and calm. And he himself is described as being reserved and being disciplined and deeply private. 1954, something happened, and this definitely put him on the map forever. A new sci-fi film was being produced by Toho Studios, and this was called Godzilla, and he wrote the score for this. He's actually considered one of the forefathers of Godzilla because the score had such a huge impact on the movie. Some of the sounds that he put in there in his orchestrations are very, definitely more of a Foley sound, right? Creating sounds. So the roar that he needed, he got gloves and he put rosin on the gloves, and then he would move his rosin glove over loosened strings on a contrabass. And then later on, he would speed that up, that sound, and that is the roar that we have. This is a terrifying metallic sound, and now we're so used to it. We're used to having all these other sounds, but he was one of the first to do these things. Many of the march-like music that we hear in that movie, and maybe also other movies, did not actually come out of Hollywood. They are actually based on earlier classical music that he wrote when he was writing marches many, many years before. Now, despite him being known as the monster score maker, he himself said, hey, I'm a classical composer first. That was what he wanted to be known as. He wrote orchestral pieces and ballets, concert pieces, chamber music, and he frequently recycled and transformed themes that he had already been working on, and I think that's not unique to him. I think a lot of composers do that. His style is described as bold, rhythmically driven, primal, but also very solid. So it can sound wild, but not out of control. Although he himself had no formal music education, he did end up going into for music education and taught for quite a while at the Tokyo College of Music. And eventually he actually became president of this music college. Students said that he was very demanding, very precise, but also deeply principled and definitely caring. In his later years, he was composing less and less, definitely less film score work, but he was given a lot of honors and he became widely respected as a pioneer of Japanese orchestral music and definitely the architect of like the Godzilla music franchise and just a major musical educator, especially for the Japanese. At the age of 91 in 2006, he passed away in Tokyo of organ failure. Of course, his legacy continues on. I mean, we all know or we all recognize the score of Godzilla, even if we've never seen the movie. But he defined the musical identity of Japanese films, which is actually big at this point. We know a lot of Japanese classical music. He helped invent the sound of the modern monster in cinema. He integrated the Ainu and Japanese elements into the orchestral music of classical Western music. He influenced generations of composers and he led the Tokyo College of Music. He wrote this amazing orchestral text. We have so much music from him. He trained so many musicians as well. If anything, he taught us that monsters are not just seen, monsters are heard first. And giving Godzilla its voice, he actually gave Japanese music one of its most powerful modern identities. Go and listen to Something by Akira Ifukube.